Thank you very much. Do we have any leave of absence to record? Or items for public question time? No? Are there any petitions this evening? Or presentations? Or deputations? Under the declarations of interest, are any new declarations to record? I'd now like to move to item 7, the confirmation of the minutes of the 10th of October. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there someone to second the minutes? Thank you. Councillor Feasy. All those in favour? Are there any against?
In favour.
Carried. Like to move to item 8, the developer contribution plans, quarterly progress reporting. Is there a member of management who wishes to speak to this item?
Through the Chair, this report is the result of the recommendations arising from the recent audit of the city's handling of developer contribution payments. It was suggested as part of that audit that the city increase its management reporting of DCP activity. The presented report intends to address this, providing information on the status of all the city's DCP activities for noting and comment by this committee. An updated report is intended to be provided at future committee meetings.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item?
Not so much a question, but just really a statement in how much easier it is to read the report when the DCAs are actually put out in the manner which they are, and with arrows pointing to the exact areas in the little dialogue box. It made a lot more user friendly, because I tend to agree on the author of the report in the fact that, you know, it's quite difficult sometimes from an elected member's perspective going through developer contribution items, especially in workshop format. This way, to visually see where the money is going and being spent or hasn't been spent is a lot user friendly and a lot more helpful for the elected members. So thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Any further comments or questions?
Through the Chair, I had one question.
Thank you.
There was previous issues noted during the 2021 report around the level of reporting not being sufficient. So noting that there's still some sort of areas for improvement, was there any sort of discussion or any areas of improvement from the previous audit to the current state in terms of level of reporting being sufficient for management insight?
Through the Chair, yeah, this report is the result of the recommendations within that audit. It intends to provide sufficient information for management oversight without obviously bombarding with too much information.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions, Mr. Arnold?
No further questions.
Thank you. We have no comments from the CEO. The officer's recommendation is to note and provide comments on the report. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, Councillor Rouse. All those in favour?
In favour.
And nil against. Thank you. Item 8.2, internal audit findings and actions. Does anyone from management wish to speak to this item?
Through the Chair, this report presents the findings and recommendations of the recent internal audit of the city's procurement practices, as well as the status of all actions arising from the previous procurement audit, which was presented to the committee back in the October meeting. You will note that segregation of duties was one identified high risk As part of that internal audit of procurement practices, the city's detailed response has been provided with an attachment via the report, and all actions will be presented at future meetings until such time as they're finalised.
CEO?
Through you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments in relation to the findings from that internal audit. I did ask for a quick investigation into the segregation of duties. The example which they provide related to an IT purchase, it was raised in error by one of the staff, and when they found that they had raised it and then inadvertently the system had gone in and then approved it, that was cancelled. So that was the one which was picked up by the internal auditor. So there was no purchasing that took place. The other thing too, though, is since we've implemented One Council, or Tech One, there is greater controls in the system around segregation of duties. And so one of the things that we are really focused on is that a person who is approving a purchase order cannot also be an approver from a financial point. And then there's also greater clarity around compulsory order matching as well.
Thank you. The audit finding on page 33, when I read it, I didn't really understand what they were trying to say. It says a purchase order listing was obtained, and it was noted that it contains 542 purchase orders with a combined value of 746 that have the same requisitioner and approver. This is out of a total population of 7,392 purchase orders of 47 million. So why was there that lack of segregation for those 542? Was it intended to have a segregation, or is it part of a necessary process? I was just unclear as to what we were really saying.
Yeah, through the chair, that is the financial year where we implemented the segregation of duties. So this same finding was identified with our Regulation 17 audit. So shortly after that, I think it was the August, we introduced the new way of operating. So this is that period between, I believe it would have been July and August that this occurred.
So it's a legacy issue, it's not new.
Yeah, through the chair, it is a legacy issue, and since then we're also in a new system where there's even greater segregation.
So extrapolating that, where it's highly unlikely we'll see this occur again. Thank you. Open for questions or other comments?
I am assuming that there was no incidents of fraud detected, because that would have been, obviously they would have reported back on that.
Through you, Madam Chair. No, there was no fraud. So part of which has been detected as part of that. So part of the process, even though there was these purchase orders, the thing which we do look for is the receipting of the purchase orders, and then there's the check-in on that.
Thank you. Mr. Arnold, do you have any questions on this item?
Yeah, thanks to the chair. I did have a question around segregation of duties, so I appreciate the additional context. One just follow up, there was a system change to stop the same requisitioner and approver, and I understand going forward with the new system that won't occur, but do you understand why the system change didn't stop this in the first instance with the legacy system?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think it was just the way the system was set up and the inability to change the system to it. It didn't really have those level of controls. Plus, it was just a legacy way that in the past, that's what had occurred. So there was no real sort of process around ensuring segregation.
Yeah, thank you. Just one observation, the audit report, whilst it details findings, it has a section on good practice as well, which is section 2.1, so references that we do have policies and procedures in place. You know, we have effective controls for tenders, etc. So I think, you know, with the findings, there's also opportunity to reflect that we have strong system of control, which I think is a good reference and in good inclusion within the internal audit report. I had one question, and I couldn't see from the report, was there any repeat findings So findings that were identified during this review that had previously been sort of raised, and if so, were any of those repeat findings identified as or self-assessed as closed?
Through the chair, not to my knowledge, though I don't have an in-depth knowledge of previous audits in this area, but not to my knowledge.
Thank you. No further questions.
I have one further question. It relates to page 36, and it's with respect to the contract management framework, the procurement procedure for procurement of goods and services 2021. I note that we have a target completion date of August 2023. I think this is a really important document to be updated, and I would encourage management to keep to that time frame, if not better it, as opposed to any possible slippage on that important document. Are there any further questions? If not, go back to the officer recommendation that we note the findings and the status of the internal audit recommended actions.
I'll move that.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse. Thank you, Councillor Winmar. All those in favour?
In favour?
Nil against, carried. Regulations 17 audit, item 8.3. Thank you, Mr. Mark.
Through the chair, this report provides information on outstanding actions arising from the city's recent Regulation 17 review. There's only one such action outstanding, which is the updating of the city's disaster recovery plan, which is out of date. The city's made the decision, given the importance of such documentation, to seek an external firm to conduct this work. A suitable external firm has been identified and chosen. They've yet to be formally appointed to the role, but that will occur this week. It's anticipated that that documentation will be developed over the coming months and presented to a future meeting of this committee.
Now, what timing do you have in mind on that work being presented to the audit risk meeting?
Certainly an update on the progress will be presented to the next committee meeting in terms of the finalisation of that documentation and the ability to run a simulation task. I anticipate that would be probably around April next year by the time we appoint them and conduct those tasks.
Thank you. CEO?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think one of the benefits of doing this work has been identified is that this is going to be undertaken in a two-stage process. So the first part, they'll go through and do a bit of a gap analysis. So we'll have that information for the meeting in February, I think it is. So we'll be able to present that, and then the next stage will be the draft plan.
Thank you. Mr. Arnold, any questions from you?
No further questions, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's,
Thank you, Mayor.
I do note this is now that hopefully the information being tracked in our Tech One is a lot better now than our Civica with a changeover. But just a question in relation to page 52nd dot point about our performance management to the ProMap software transitioning. When are we going to change to the ProMap, roughly?
Through the chair, that has happened, and the city is in the progress of transitioning all of its procedures to ProMap.
Oh, right.
So that's
transitioning
ongoing.
Okay. And in relation to the actual disaster recovery plan issue there, was this a resource issue or was just no procedure in place?
Through you, Madam Chair. We do have a disaster recovery plan, but it probably is not at the right level to be able to guide business continuity. So it's not just a case of resource, it's a case of capability. Disaster resource planning is quite a specialised area, so it makes sense to bring in a specialist company to then be able to do that. And then our staff will be able to learn from those people.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have an officer recommendation. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Rouse. All those in favour?
In favour?
Nil against, carried. The next item is 8.4, the risk management report. Does management wish to introduce this item?
Thank you. Through the chair, at each meeting of this committee, all high-level operational as well as all strategic risks are presented for noting and comment by the committee. It's been some 8 weeks since the October meeting. In that time, the only real change to these risks presented are that strategic risk 7 is no longer marked as active, so that risk is corporate business system is not delivered on time, on budget, or at the required quality. So that risk will remain recorded in the system. It's just marked as inactive and not presented to this committee on the basis that the risk is no longer present. Phase 1 having now been achieved by the city. Otherwise, there's no significant changes to that presented than that presented to the previous meeting.
Well, that's a cause for celebration and thanks. So thank you very much, all involved. Any questions on attachment A? Thank you, Mayor.
Just on page 72, we talk about SR23, that's the financial loss arising from inaccurate assessment of DCP infrastructure cost estimates resulting in an inability to deliver required infrastructure. I'm just, and I know we have our next review back on the 15th of February 2023. I'm just wondering whether we as a group are comfortable with that risk rating and whether we should be making it a higher risk rating. And I say that because we have had incidences where there's been an incorrect calculation on DCP funding, and it has obviously been a liability to the council. So I'm just wondering whether that could be reviewed and have a closer look at it in February.
Thank you, CEO.
Through you, Chair. Part of in undertaking a risk assessment is you look at what the risk is, but more importantly, what are the controls that you have put in place to try and manage and mitigate that risk. I think the factors that you are referring to in the past probably didn't have the level of control around it at that point in time. Since then, we've had the DCP internal audit undertake. We brought in an external party to do a review. Both areas within city infrastructure and city development and sustainability have put in more controls and processes around it. They have a working group that meet regularly to go through it. So there's a number of ways that this is now being managed, which then lowers that risk.
I had thought there was an incident that didn't seem that long ago, but mind you, the year's flying very quickly, where there was a liability, and these risk measures would have been in place, but it was from a legacy from quite a while ago, and then it was the catching up, I suppose.
Through the chair, the incident that I think you may be referring to related to a calculation around a refund. Yeah, so it wasn't to do with the actual DCP infrastructure costs. It was a calculation around what the liability of the developer incurred and how that was calculated through the planning and financial teams. So it's a different matter.
Are you satisfied with that answer? Thank you. Moving to attachment B, page 80. This relates to OR 105, risk of incident or injury to volunteer bushfire brigade volunteers whilst firefighting. Coming up to the firefighting season, I thought we should look at this particular risk and reflect on our calibration of medium and whether there's any activity occurring in the city at the moment around the mitigation of that risk.
Through the chair, the committee may or may not be aware that we're actually in the process of recruiting for the Emergency Services Coordinator, who is our Chief Bushfire Control Officer, and that role is currently being managed through a deputy who is the captain of one of the bushfire brigades, and our manager essential services as sharing that responsibility for those functions as the chief. We have been working closely prior to the departure of the Emergency Services Coordinator. We had in place workplace health and safety packages with both bushfire brigades that would look at induction, training and development prior to this commencement of the fire season. So they are in place. We are in the process in the early new year to have further face-to-face sessions with the manager, human resources, myself, going to both brigades to work through and being clear around responsibilities and requirements under those under the new legislation and understanding what's required in that space. So there are a number of points in place at the moment, but there is further work to be done.
So are we confident that we're in as good a shape as possible given those circumstances of resources?
I think given where we are at with our resources, we are in the best place possible, and I am confident that with the new incumbent, where we are very close to hopefully appointing very soon, we'll have new experience, new capabilities to be able to project manage this particular, managing this risk going forward.
Thank you. Could we go back to the recommendation, please, on the screen? Oh, that was quick. The recommendation is that we note and provide comment on attachment A and B. Do I have someone to move that? Thank you, Councillor Feasey. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Winmar. All those in favour?
In favour.
Nil against. Carried. The next item is 8.5, the Work Health and Safety Statistical Report. Would management care to introduce this item?
Through the chair. It's usual practice at this meeting to produce a statistical report. That wasn't possible at this particular meeting because we're in the transition of moving to the new software system, MyOsh. I can update the committee in that MyOsh, we have been working through the configuration, and we had the final sign off by the executive this morning, which means that we've tested the system, we've tested the workflow. It's ready to be signed off with the consultants, and from that stage our data will then be migrated across. That will take approximately a week. From there we'll be able to then start producing our statistical data again. In addition, at the last Audit and Risk Committee meeting, we presented the Safety and Wellbeing Strategic Plan. I can report that the Work Health and Safety Committee have been progressing through that, and that the tasks have been allocated, and there will be an update of that particular plan through to the committee at the next meeting. On top of that, whilst there is no data or the plan presented, the month of October is a national safety awareness, and we've looked to try and raise the importance of safety and health in the city, and we undertook our second Safety Expo, which was well attended by our staff, and also we had an information session from Greg Heyer from the Stitch in Time charity, and he spoke about the importance of mental health and well-being. So we're progressing in that area.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Could somebody please tell me,
Oh, so
where is it? Sorry. What is a privileged account? Sorry, I'm looking at page 88, and we're talking about accounts, account users. 2 out of the 13 identified privileged accounts were deemed as inappropriate or not required by management. So I wasn't really sure what a privileged account was opposed to a normal account. Is that elected members?
Through the chair, I believe that's the next item.
Oh, I do beg your pardon, I've got ahead. Sorry.
that's fine. Just before we finish this item, I just wanted to inquire as to the security over any information that could be deemed personal, moving that from our manual system to an online system, and the necessity to ensure that any information is maintained securely and not kept unnecessarily because of the cybersecurity risks. Comments,
Certainly.
please.
Through the scope of works, when the city went out to look for software providers, that was one of the criteria that was assessed, and the IT manager was on that panel to ensure that the appropriate, I guess, mitigating risks are put in place so that doesn't occur.
Thank you. I'm happy to move this item from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Madam Mayor. All those in favour?
Favour.
Nil against. Carried. Now, the big item of the day is the annual report, item 8.6. Would management care to introduce this item? CEO?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the audit has been completed. Unfortunately, it did take a bit of time for the auditors to work through because of the revaluation of assets, and so there's just a bit of to and froing around some questions from it. I think the key finding from the audit, though, is that it's a unqualified audit with no significant matters which have been identified. So I think that's a huge reflection on Pauline Mickelson, who's here, and her team working on it. The other thing too, which has come out from it, is obviously there are some findings regarding IT, which we're working through. I think part of it is around the interpretation of where they see the council at this point in time in relation to particularly around cybersecurity and network access management. So a number of those things have been addressed, and we have responded to that accordingly. But overall, there is nothing of significant to report on it. I think one of the things which the OAG did mention in the closeout meeting is that we are in a very good position overall, which is a good reflection. And out of 142 audits to be completed, we're one of 35, which will be done before Christmas, so we are in a pretty good state.
Thank you. So moving to the financial audit findings, page 86, this relates to the in-house revaluation of the entire infrastructure class of assets. Now, I did attend the closeout meeting, and we did briefly discuss a possible different process going forward. I was wondering, Wayne, if you'd care to outline some context around this finding, and also some suggestions going forward, if you care.
I'll just do a quick overview, and then Doug can come in and provide a bit more detail around it. I think one of the things which the auditors sort of struggled to understand was that there is no requirement to have a third party undertake your valuations, and that would be actually quite a costly process to do. I think one of the things which we probably can tidy up a little bit is just making really clear around the project management costs, the overheads that go towards your valuations. We did have quite clear data to show the basis to those. I think one of the things that we will have a look at, though, is undertaking external, getting third-party valuation on a part of our assets on a periodic basis, so that over a period of, let's say, 5 years, we have gone through most of our assets. But I don't think you want to get to the stage of doing complete valuation, but just doing a percentage of that. So we'll work that out and report that back.
Thank you. Doug, anything to add?
Yeah, through the chair, this did come up during the closeout meeting, and what I raised at the closeout meeting was there is a significant part of external third-party involvement in the valuation process. So the major asset class is roads. I think they're about a $400 million asset class. They are all externally inspected, so condition rating by an external party, and it uses a laser fitted to a vehicle that then does a calculation. So it is very independent of the organisation, and it's as is required by the accounting standards. All the rates that are used to do the calculation are externally sourced, and that's actually most of the time in doing the process is that external source. So I think for the auditors, they struggled with, because the city managed the process internally, they wanted to go to a deeper level of audit. Then with an external, they considered it, essentially it was someone else doing the audit on their behalf, and they just did an overview. I think from the city's perspective, doing some checking is good, so external third-party checking, but we do need to have a lot of confidence in the numbers, because they're the basis on which we calculate our renewal numbers, and that's the basis on which we do our ratio. So we put a lot of work into making the numbers as accurate as we can make them.
Thank you. I think that's, a combination of those two comments. It's really useful because there's quite a large increase, but that lacking of the external may think that it's therefore arbitrary, but by explaining the process by which you go through, for example, the laser review of the roads, I think it can provide a degree of comfort. And I think it would be good to have a program where different asset classes are reviewed each year, but that doesn't mean all asset classes have to be. It needs to be pragmatic, and it needs to be affordable, and it needs to be commensurate with what are we going to do with the data, and does it assist in a true and fair understanding of the accounts. Open to further questions, please. Mayor, please.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I did ask the question ahead of myself before, but who is a privileged account? What is a privileged account? I'm happy to take it on notice.
Right, do you want to go?
Through the chair, the privilege account is a higher level of access to the particular system. I believe this was the authority system at the time, so the person who's got allocated the privilege account has more ability within the system and possibly to change configuration within the system.
Okay. Just in relation to finding 5, and I'm sorry I wasn't at the closeout meeting, and in relation to the server room itself, and there's some security issues which I note that management comment 5 agrees with, and you're looking at swipe card access, installation, etc. There is nothing there that indicates that you would consider, and it might be an overreach, consider putting up a security camera at the door as well. Is that because we might be migrating off external, though it is several years away?
Through the chair, it's certainly something we could consider. The auditor usually gives advice on what they would deem appropriate, and the real challenge we have with this particular room is it's not just the city that's got access to it. It's a server storage for, well, in the past it's been a server storage for another organisation, being the business incubator. We host other organisations. Now I don't believe that's still occurring, so now it's an opportunity to lock it down so it's only the city access and then know who's going in and out through the swipe card. But if we, after doing this, we still consider the risk to be unreasonable, we might consider the cameras. One of the other comments within the management comment is we're not going to respond to some of the environmental recommendations, so temperature monitoring, humidity monitoring, and that's because our draft strategy for IT is a cloud-based strategy. So ultimately, this room won't host servers.
Okay, thank you. There's just a couple more too. I was a bit concerned when reading finding 7, but it was a 2021 finding, and there's several dot points there. But it was pleasing that the status has been updated and the IT strategy is currently being finalised. Again, was that a resource issue?
Through the chair, arguably it's a resource issue. At the time of the 2021 audit, the cybersecurity need was deemed a lot higher than the IT strategy, so we put our focus into the cybersecurity manual. With that being complete, we went straight into the IT strategy. So the IT strategy has probably been at a 90% completion for a couple of months. It's just that little bit around the edges that we're finalising before we'll be able to get it to an end.
And in relation to finding 8 about the security penetration testing, is that a hack exercise?
Yeah, through the chair, it's a hack exercise, yes.
Okay, so are we doing that now? Seeing we've really tightened up on our cyber security?
Through the chair, that will occur during this financial year, so in the next audit, we will see that this finding won't be there anymore.
Great, thank you. No further questions.
Really good questions, thank you. On the IT strategy, when do we anticipate that being finalised?
Through the chair, within weeks, we are really just now going through the words, so tidying up the grammar and punctuation, that type of thing, so it's pretty much to an end.
Thank you, and then that would flow through to the resource allocation budget process, presumably. Are there any more questions on that particular part of the report? I'd like to then step through attachments A through to E and invite any questions or comments. Firstly, attachment A, the annual report, the annual financial statements.
Through the chair.
Yes, Mr. Arnold.
Yeah, just a follow up to the CEO's comments in terms of the overarching opinion, which is an unqualified opinion from the auditor, and that's a really important sort of milestone and a reflection of hundreds of hours of work internally, to get to that stage. So just a thanks and congratulations in terms of achieving that, because I think that's essentially what that is saying is these financial statements that we're looking at now are free from material misstatement, so it means that we can rely on them, that the figures that are included can be used for decision making and as a reflection around the council's performance. So I have a couple of other questions specific to the findings, but just in terms of overarching, just to reflect in terms of achieving that result and that we can rely on as a committee and also for the council for their decision making.
Thank you, well said. Would you like to proceed with your other questions on the statements?
Yes, thanks. And through the chair, in terms of some of the findings, and it's a bit of a follow-on maybe from the asset revaluation sort of reflection, is there's a number of disagrees in terms of the management comment to the recommendations, notably findings 3, 4.3, 6 and 8. That's somewhat unusual to have that amount of disagree. So maybe just additional information around that dialogue with management once we receive those findings. Just in terms of that additional context would be useful, because, like I said, that's with those sort of findings, obviously we'll have to make a decision whether we're going to pursue those or not. So just invite any extra comment in terms of those disagrees.
Through the chair, I guess to understand the disagrees, it's important to understand the tardiness of the Auditor General's Office, or the contractor on behalf of the Auditor General's Office, with delivering their findings to the city. So the city was putting pressure on the Auditor General's Office to make the Audit and Risk Committee meetings so that we could comply with our statutory obligations. These findings from the IT audit, which was completed in May, the city received about 2 days before we wanted these documents signed off. So if you had plenty of notice, then you would discuss the findings and reach an agreement. Because of the lateness of receiving these, we highlighted that we disagreed with some of the findings and that we think that the findings should be modified. The RSM, the contractor, did agree to modify some, and with the ones they didn't agree to modify, when they came and presented to management and the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, their comment was they're happy to have the disagreement because they consider the items to be of such low risk. It's quite reasonable for management to essentially say, look, they're not a finding worth any further consideration. So a good example of that one is the one referring to the cybersecurity manual. Management's view is it's semantics. There's whether or not a should or a must have a particular meaning, and whether or not 30 minutes, because it's not said within the cybersecurity manual, is important. The finding was so minor that they suggested we just change the manual to accommodate what we want to do. The city's view, and that was after the city had identified that they didn't agree with the finding. The city's view in response, because we were out of time, is it's really not that important. Our view is we're within the spirit of the cybersecurity manual. So that's one example of the disagreement and how low level they are.
Through the chair, thanks very much for your response. I think, upon reflection and taking considerations to the comments, it appears that there's some items of feedback that could be provided back through the typical end of audit survey, because understanding timeframes, sort of etc. In terms of trying to impose low value items or not being comfortable with some of the recommendations that have been sort of given, then there's might be opportunity for improvement from RSM and through the IAG. So just to invite those honest feedback as much as we can through part of that sort of survey result. Just a question: is RSM be the nominated contractor for our audit next year?
Through the chair, our understanding is RSM, we're on a 3-year contract, so that will have come to an end. So the Auditor General's Office will have to go back to market, but then whether or not we get RSM, another contractor, or the Auditor General's Office is really unknown at this point. I think the indications are it would probably be the Auditor General's Office next time, but we're still not sure.
Okay, well, that's a process we can observe. I'd like to move to Attachment A, the actual annual financial report, and open that for any questions as a whole document. Mr. Arnold, do you have any questions on that report?
Yeah, through the chair, one question. So ratios was typically included in previous years, had a large level of sort of discussion, didn't note it within these financial reports. Was that covered as part of the financial statement and audit process?
Thank you.
Through the chair, there's no requirement to keep the ratios in the financial statements this year, so they've been included in the community report that's at the end, so that hasn't been commented on, but they still are available in the fourth attachment.
Yeah. Attachment E. Anything else on Attachment A?
Nothing else, Chair.
Could we move to the cash flow statement, please? Oh, I don't know. I'm waiting to get there. That's it? Yeah. So, given the importance of ensuring liquidity of any organisation, could I invite management to speak to this statement at a high level, please?
I'll just have to, sorry, through the chair, I have to take this question on notice. I'm not able to. Sorry.
There's no need to take the question on
Okay.
notice.
Sorry.
If we just note the net cash provided by operating activities of $12 million, from investing activities, -6, and if we move down to the bottom of the statement, net cash provided by financing, -2, cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year, $10.5 million. I think that's a very strong cash position of the council, and certainly an increase from last year. So, well done. Thank you. Moving to the management letter, item B, the auditor's closing report. Mr. Arnold has commented on that already. Are there any questions or comments on that item, please? It's a long way down. I'm sorry, I didn't. There we go. Okay.
Down, Lindsay.
Okay. Perhaps
Just hold there, Lindsay.
CEO, did you wish to make any comment on behalf of the auditors on this?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I've nothing really to say on that one because they found nothing of significance. All the controls were in place. Yeah, nothing really was identified.
Well, I think it's worth saying that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Attachment C. We just pause there. Infrastructure valuation, that's already been discussed. Are there any questions or comments on C? That relates to the financial statements. Moving to attachment D, relating to the management letter of the ICT systems. Okay. So, CEO, did you wish to comment on this?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Doug's already explained sort of the to and fro that's taken place, and it was obviously a timing issue regards going back further on these comments. I think one of the things that would be useful in the probably first quarter of next year is we'll do a presentation to the Audit and Risk Committee around where we are with our IT, because the strategy will be done then. There's been a lot of work that's taken place around cybersecurity. So we can give you a bit of a holistic overview in terms of where we are at that point.
I think that'd be excellent. Mr. Arnold, do you have any questions on this? This one is management letter, ICT.
Thanks through the chair. No, thanks for the update. I think the upcoming presentation would be useful. So look forward to that. I think in terms of the sort of findings, there's a few different sort of sources and a lot of work in terms of the work in IT, which is which is sort of great. And it, from the discussion, there's a amount of resources and prioritisation that's going. And from a process perspective, the comfort and ability for for us to be able to sort of push back, around sort of issues that come up, I think is pleasing. I think audit provides us a rich vein of information, but balancing that out with prioritisation and relative risk, I think is important. So no further comments from me.
Thank you. And we can now move to attachment E, which is the annual. Oh yes, Madam Mayor.
Just on attachment D, page 175, and certainly taking on board and endorse those comments made by Mr. Arnold. I'm just curious why the city has a 6-month cut-off for inactive accounts, and there's no intention to change this approach. The explanation is given because, we have a lot of casuals in the workplace. I thought a 6-month period, though, for an account to be open was rather a long period of time. So I just wanted a little bit of discussion around that. I gather this is an IT account. So.
Through the chair, yeah, it is an IT account. The 6 months is consistent with the HR approach with the casual workforce. So it's for 6 months. After 6 months, we then question, are they still an employee? So with the IT team, in the exact same time frame, it flags in the system that the account's been not used for that period.
And you're comfortable with being open for as long as 6 months?
Through the chair, we still have in place all the normal controls. So the controls to prevent hacking, so complex passwords, multi-factor authentication, while you're off-site, are still in place. Our systems also have audit trails within them, so we do know who's been within the system. So if an employee who hasn't been to the office for 3 months does come, no different to any employee who could just do that and do something to the systems. That's why we have audit controls. So the 6 month is really just a convenient time because it matches the HR approach.
Thank you.
So just as a follow-up, it doesn't mean if I finish, I can't go in and access the system. It just means the account's there in case I come back in the future.
That's correct. So the employee won't actually be able to use the account. It just sits there rather than having to recreate the account, employ a casual with the new super forms, taxation forms, all those sorts of things.
Okay,
it just sits in the background.
Thank you.
So it's suspended as
Yes.
such.
Yeah, through the chair, if an employee leaves the organisation formally, so a full-time employee, letter of resignation, at the point of leaving the organisation, their account is finalised. But the casuals, because they come and go over a period of time, we allow their account to be in place for 6 months since the last time they used it, because that matches the HR process.
Thank you. And finally, the annual report community section. Now, this is where the KPIs is that correct? Yeah, the ratios, I beg your pardon. So, Mr. Arnold, perhaps we could go to that page to begin with. Are we able to identify the page? It's a very attractive document. Is it page 45, that against outcome 3? Is that what we're referring to? That's where there's the debt service ratio asset renewal funding ratio, amongst others. So, Mr. Arnold, are you able to perhaps speak to this while management's finding the appropriate reference in the document? That's it, page
Yeah,
45. Yep, page
Yeah,
45.
thanks to the chair. Yeah, I think that this information was included in the revised agenda, which was sent through today. So I haven't had an opportunity to review and perhaps just in terms of those sort of ratios, etc. And maybe that's some opportunity.
Hello?
But, hello?
Would you be able to repeat that, please? I think we lost you just momentarily.
No worries. I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but this section was included in the revised agenda that was sent out today. I don't believe this was part of the original agenda, so I haven't had the opportunity to review. It does look like what's on screen there are the other sort of measures. So, yeah, it's something that we could perhaps get additional context now, or maybe part of another another opportunity in our upcoming Audit and Risk Committee session.
Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. In terms of the ratios, there isn't really a lot of change from previous years. We've sort of followed the trend. Obviously, the main one is the asset sustainability ratio, which has been an issue for the council for a number of years, but as part of our long-term financial plan, our strategic community plan, we've got to focus on addressing that. So that has been coming up over the years, and over the next few years will continue to come up. The council set a target of 80% to reach asset sustainability, and so there has been more funding which has been applied into it. In terms of the other ratios, we're pretty much in line with what the industry average is for those.
Thank you very much. So on the asset sustainability, that's really the ongoing maintenance issue of the assets.
Yeah, so it's the amount of funding going into your renewal program. So in the past, there probably hasn't been sufficient funding going into that, but we've now addressed that.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item E? If not, could we go back to the original officer recommendation, please? And here is that the Audit and Risk Committee recommends that Council at its next ordinary council meeting, 1 through to 5, receive the annual financial statement, independent auditors closeout report, community plan, advertise the availability of the annual report, and accept the date for the electors' general meeting. So, could I have a mover for that motion? Mayor?
I'm happy to move, and also to pass on my thanks and congratulations to the staff on the annual general report that's before us in draft. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconded? Thank you, Councillor Rouse. All in favour?
In favour?
Nil against. Thank you. I'd also just like to call out and congratulate the team. I thought the accounts were really clean. Obviously, the Auditor General did as well, and I thought the presentation of the information tonight was also of a very high quality, and I really appreciate your willingness to take on our questions and to answer them in such an articulate way. So well done to the finance team and management in general. Are there any late or urgent items? No. We have no questions taken on notice. Are there any other items of general business? If not, as I close the meeting, I'd like to thank everyone for your active contribution, both management and the committee. I think that it's been a busy year. I can't believe that it's the end of the year already, but I guess we're all feeling that way. And I'd just like to pass on my best wishes for the festive season to everyone. have a safe and happy summer time. Thank you very much, and thank you